Yay! Welcome everyone to Buddhist Center. My name is Jeff Allen. Once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically the section on ethics. And ethics, when we see how they relate to the other parts of the path and how they become the foundation of our concentration and our ability to really generate a special insight or wisdom that eventually becomes a direct realization of emptiness, we become very invested in knowing what those ethics exactly are, and how we can refine our relationship with them so that we can eventually get to the point where we're looking at ethics in terms of the small scope right now, the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity. But eventually, as we go into the teachings for beings of shared in common with beings of medium capacity and teachings for beings of great capacity, we see more expanded ethics that are presented, like the individual liberation vows. We see presented in terms of the 7 lifetime individual liberation vows and the ethics that one can keep as the 2 vows of a householder, the 2 novice vows, the probationary nun's vow, and the 2 fully ordained vows, monks and nuns. So we see how the ethics can become even more pure, and will need to be in order to develop the higher realizations. Because when we look at the medium scope, and we look at the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, we see ethics being the foundation, which is like when we use the comparison or the analogy of cutting down a tree. In order to cut down a tree, you need a strong body and a good arm, and then some sort of tool that will do the cutting. Likewise, in order to really cut the root of cyclic existence and see emptiness, one has to have the foundation of ethics, which is like the body, a foundation in concentration, which is like a good arm, and the foundation in wisdom in terms of the baskets, which is like the machine or the sword or the chainsaw used to cut. So these, ethics, concentration, and wisdom here are, found in the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket, respectively. So the first thing we find in the foundation is ethics, and we never find any of the teachings. So now we saw the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity with the individual liberation vows, and then the teachings for beings of great capacity, we find those, holy bodhisattva vows, the kind of ethical behavior of a bodhisattva. And then in the Tantrayana vehicle, and specifically highest yoga tantra, we find the tantric vows. And we find the commitments in the other forms of tantra, but in the highest yoga tantras, we find the root and secondary tantric vows. So ethics becomes important at the beginning, middle, and end in terms of, if we're looking at small, medium, and great scope. So it's so wonderful that we're looking at this topic, and we've looked at it so many times. Rinpoche invested so much of his teaching time into abandoning the 10 non-virtues and how karma and its effects were inevitable and were certain. So I feel so fortunate to be able to discuss this today, and have a little bit of a clue about why we need to do so, because of Rinpoche's kindness, and seeing the fruit of trying to pay attention to my mind in my life, of a calmer mind, of a more peaceful mind. So before we go any further, let's get into a physical position that's conducive to clearing our mind, which will get all of our channels and our winds and our blood flowing exactly the way that it should. So we'll get into the 7-point Vairakana posture. We've gotten into this posture many times before, so I won't give the details of it, but we want to make sure that our back is very straight. This says vertebrae like a stack of coins. So get into the 7-point Vairakana posture with your legs in the cross-legged fashion, your hands right on left, your back straight like a stack of coins, shoulders in a comfortable position, head slightly forward, eyes slightly open, pointed at the tip of your nose, and mouth in a comfortable position with your tongue against the teeth, and begin breathing in through your nose, bringing the air all the way in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, bringing it all the way to the top, and then very gently turning the breath around and exhaling and counting 1. You're going to repeat that process, breathing in a very, very natural fashion, not too quickly, not too slowly, just breathing in naturally, bringing it all the way to the top of the breath, filling the lungs and the diaphragm, and exhaling and counting 2. While you're doing this breathing process of breathing in and breathing out and counting, your mind is only focusing on that, and we're going to add the focal object of the front generation aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is about 2 feet away, eye height about the size of your thumb, beautiful, radiant, and 3-dimensional. So now your focal object, so you're going to have mindfulness. You're going to tell your mind what to do. You are not going to forget the focal object. The focal object now is breathing in, filling the lungs and the diaphragm all the way to the top, turning the breath around, and exhaling and counting 1, and then increasing the numbers as you do it more, 2, 3, 4, 5, as well as having the front generation image of Buddha Shakyamuni right there. So let's begin with this exercise to get our minds to a more calm place where we're focusing on a virtuous object, where we aren't allowing our minds to kind of stray and become distracted and scatter and think about the things we're attached or have aversion to. And we won't allow our minds to get sleepy and dull. We want that object of observation of the breathing in and out and the counting and the object of observation of Buddha Shakyamuni to be extremely, extremely clear. So we're making sure that it's only that focal object, and that focal object is as clear, just like laser clear. So let's do this exercise for a moment. We're so fortunate to have this human basis, the 8 leisures. We have such an opportunity to practice the Dharma. Incredible that we can focus on a holy being like Buddha Shakyamuni. We have access to Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. Buddha Shakyamuni has abandoned all negative qualities and only has excellent qualities. Buddha Shakyamuni has gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. We will do exactly the same thing. All sentient beings will become a Buddha. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. We are sentient beings. We have Buddha nature. Our mind can mature just like Buddha Shakyamuni's mind matured into the state of perfection. Our mind is empty of inherent existence, just like Buddha Shakyamuni's mind. Our mind is not in the nature of sullied or stain. Our mind is in the nature of clear light and unsullied. Our mind is naturally pure and empty of inherent existence. The stains which it possesses are adventitious, are extra, are defilements that can be removed. The removal is the maturity. As we mature, as we proliferate our minds into the state of the Buddha's mind, we will abandon all of the negativities just as the Buddha has abandoned them. We will mature into full Buddhas. We're so fortunate that Buddha has taught us the entire pathway to be able to mature to the state that he is in. A state of fearlessness, a state of complete bliss, perfect wisdom, perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect power, perfect skillful means. We will achieve that same state of omniscience. We will achieve the Dharmakaya. The Buddha has shown us exactly how we will do so. Think about why we came to these teachings. Think about the questions that we could never have answered that the Buddha so kindly answers for us. The pain that we experience, the freedom from pain that we want. And the Buddha has shown us all of these things. Think about the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of suffering, and convinced us so clearly that we were in a position that we wanted to get out of. A position that has to over and over and over again, because of contaminated karma afflictions and their seeds, be forced into a set of contaminated aggregates that have to experience various types of suffering. We know of the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. We're moving so quickly towards all of these things, as Buddha said. Every moment moving so quickly, but it seems like everything's so static and so permanent. Any moment we'll be sick. Any moment we could die. But we don't believe it. It doesn't seem like that. Any moment we'll be separated from pleasant things. Any moment we'll meet with something unpleasant. Any moment we won't get what we want. Or we'll have to experience some kind of suffering physically or mentally because of these appropriated aggregates and parts that we have. The uncertainty of cyclic existence, over and over and over again, having these differing relationships. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends. We don't have any static relationships or certainty in cyclic existence. We don't know when we're going to die. Everything is moving so quickly in a direction that we don't know what it will be. The only way we will know what it will be is if we look at our behavior, we look at our actions, we look at our virtues and our non-virtues. Our virtuous actions will lead to happiness, non-virtuous actions will lead to suffering. We have so much uncertainty. Since beginningless time, we've engaged in both of those things, and will be forced and pushed around by those things in our future lives if we haven't gotten rid of the grasping at true establishment. Being reborn again and again and shucking off that body that we're reborn into, sometimes quicker, sometimes it takes longer, but we shuck that body off, and then we go to the higher realms, and then sometimes we go to the lower realms. And the Buddha said that the likelihood would be that we would go to the lower realms, because the beings that go from the higher realms to the lower realms are like atoms in the universe, and the beings that go from the higher realms back to the higher realms are like the atoms on a fingernail. So the atoms in a universe compared to the atoms on a fingernail. So if we're in the higher realms, and we are, because we're a human being, the likelihood of when we die being a human again is as likely as the comparison of the number of atoms on a fingernail will be the likelihood that we will be in the higher realms, be a human again, and the number of atoms in the universe will be the numbers of beings that will go to the lower realms. So the likelihood will be that we'll be forced into even more suffering than we even know. And who will be there with us as we shuck these bodies off and go to higher and lower realms? We will be alone. We can't bring our money. We can't bring any material things with us. We can't bring friends. The person that we love so much may be our enemy in a very, very short period of time when we're thrust into our next future rebirth. Friends can't help. Money can't help. Possessions can't help. Our body will be the thing that kills us. Our body will be the thing that expires. Yet we hold it so dear. All of these coarse sufferings that we have to experience over and over and over again. We need to think about these so clearly, because this is how we generate real renunciation, a desire to emerge from them. We have to find out what we have to emerge from in terms of their causes in order to emerge from their results. So the only way we can generate renunciation at the first level is to understand what suffering is and what we definitely want to get out of. We recognize the suffering of suffering, those coarse physical and mental sufferings, and then the suffering of change, which is the bait that keeps us in cyclic existence. those contaminated happinesses, those things that we search after, we become so attached to, that we believe will give us some sort of certainty of happiness, but in the end, or eventually, they turn into the greatest form of suffering we could ever imagine because of separation. But it's the bait that keeps us thinking that we don't need to practice the Dharma, that everything is just fine, everything will be okay if I just get this or that. It's the bait that keeps us from practicing spirituality. And then we're forced again and again and again, this pervasive compounded suffering, by our contaminated karmas, afflictions and their seeds, forced again and again and again into a set of aggregates that are contaminated, that have to experience suffering, and we don't have any control over that. And the Buddha said that lack of control is misery. Lack of freedom is misery. And we're currently in that state. And the Buddha said that is what is truly the superior truth of suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering, being forced again and again and again by these afflictions, by contaminated karmas and seeds, into a set of aggregates without freedom. And then the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of origin, and showed us exactly how we suffer and why we suffer. The Buddha said that all effects are dependent upon causes. Suffering is an effect or a result, and that if we find out exactly what causes suffering, we can get rid of it. The Buddha stated that what causes our suffering, when he investigated and was able to get rid of suffering himself by getting rid of what was called origin, is the follows. Sorry. The origin of suffering is the conception of true existence, this idea that phenomena of person, self, and person have some sort of an inherent existence. Things exist, but they don't inherently exist. Finding how they subjectively exist conventionally, but don't inherently exist ultimately, is the middle way. And the Buddha stated that the misapprehension of phenomena of self and person is what causes inappropriate attention, then causes the afflictions to arise, and from the afflictions come contaminated karmas, and from contaminated karmas come samsara and suffering. And if we could get rid of the origin of suffering at its root, the ignorance that gives rise to the inappropriate attention, then gives rise to the afflictions of attachment and hatred and ignorance and pride and so forth, then the karmas, then the contaminated actions of our body, speech, and mind that those afflictions give rise to wouldn't occur. And if the afflictions aren't present, then the karmas can't give rise to cyclic existence. So if we get rid of the afflictions, the origin of suffering, that which gives rise to suffering at its root, when we look at the 12 links of dependent origination, we see that the root of the links is ignorance, and then compositional activity or karma, and then consciousness. You know, the actions we do plant a seed. So the Buddha said that if we can reverse the process and we can get rid of the ignorance that gives rise to those afflictions that give rise to the contaminated actions, then samsara could end. And the Buddha said that this is the third noble truth, the superior truth of cessation, that suffering can end if you get rid of its cause. And the Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of path, and shows us through the wisdom realizing emptiness. Through wisdom, one can cut the root of cyclic existence. One can get rid of the origin of suffering. And if you get rid of the origin of suffering, that which the origin of suffering gives rise to, suffering, is abandoned. And if there are no causes, a result can't occur. And if the Buddha has reached a state where there are never again going to be causes for suffering, because the ignorance has been permanently eradicated. There's a permanent abandonment of the ignorance, and a permanent abandonment of suffering. So fortunate that we can meet with these teachings and live in a world where we know how to get rid of the origin of suffering. We know how to precisely identify what the truth of suffering is. We know how to precisely identify what the origin of suffering is that we need to abandon. We know how to precisely identify what the cessation of suffering is that we want to achieve or actualize. And we know how to precisely identify what the path is that we need to meditate upon. And we're so fortunate that we've got these teachings in our world, and the way that the Buddha explained the Four Noble Truths in the second way, where he showed us how we would practice them, we understand this and we feel so fortunate. Now we recognize that all sentient beings don't have these same answers that we do. We recognize that our friends, all those loved ones we see around us, they have to experience all of these 8 types of suffering and 6 types of suffering and 3 types of suffering. No one is immune. Everyone who is a sentient being in cyclic existence has to experience among the 3 types of suffering, of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. Even those beings in the highest realms, the formless realms of cyclic existence, have to experience the pervasive compounded suffering and be thrust into a new set of aggregates eventually of suffering. So we start to look around and realize that everyone has the same situation that we do. And those people that we love so much have the same situation that we do. And all sentient beings, since beginningless time, have had every relationship with us. So those beings that I love so much and care about so much in this life the beings that I care about and love so much in this life have to experience the suffering that I'm talking about. But since beginningless time, I've had relationships that were just as close in previous lives to other sentient beings as the ones that I have in this life. So all sentient beings, it is said, have been my mother. All sentient beings have been my brother. All sentient beings have been my sister. All sentient beings have been all these different forms of my loved ones. And they all have to experience the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and 3 types of suffering. We recognize that since beginningless time, we've had all these different relationships with sentient beings. So labeling sentient beings as friends, or enemies, or neutrals is really childish, because we've had every single relationship with every single sentient being. So there's no stability in terms of those labels. Normally we would say I would take care of my friends more than a stranger or a neutral person, and I would take care of a neutral person much more than an enemy. But when we recognize that since beginningless time we've had every relationship with every sentient being, those labels start to disintegrate and we become willing to equally benefit every single one of those types of beings. We have this equal desire to benefit. We recognize that they've had all these relationships with us. They've been so kind to us. And how nice it could be if we could repay their kindness. I want to repay the kindness that these beings have shown me. I know what it feels like to love someone in this life. And I've loved all sentient beings in other lives, and they've loved me like that. They've taken care of me when I was so vulnerable. How could I repay their kindness? I know that I'm not satisfied with the suffering of change of cyclic existence. So any kind of material offering I can give to them is just the suffering of change, is contaminated. I have to be as generous as possible, but how could I really, really repay their kindness? What would it take to really repay their kindness? We see they're all equally so important. Everyone feels happiness just like I feel happiness, and it feels good. Everyone feels pain just like I feel pain, and it feels bad. Everyone wants happiness. No one wants suffering. We all have this in common. We're all equally important. If there are 100 people standing in front of me, I couldn't possibly say that my happiness is more important than those 100 people's happiness. And my pain and the removal of my pain is more important than the removal of your pain and all 100 beings in front of me's pain. We all equally should have that happy feeling and have our pain removed. We all equally have Buddha nature. All sentient beings, the Buddha said, have Buddha nature. We have proliferating Buddha nature and natural Buddha nature. My mind is empty of inherent existence, just like your mind is empty of inherent existence. The subject I can only be posited in dependence upon a relationship to other. So in order for me to even posit myself, I need to come up with you as other. And in order for you to posit yourself as self, you have to come up with me as other. It's in dependence upon other that self is established. And when we start to try to find an inherently existent self that should be cherished, that is more important than other, we see that I am empty of inherent existence and you are empty of inherent existence, and that emptiness, that nature is exactly the same. So how could something who's with the same exact nature have more importance on one side or another. My needs and all sentient beings' needs are equally important. All sentient beings are equally as important as I am. This is something we have to establish in our mind. If we have any hopes of getting bodhicitta, we have to establish this neutrality, this idea of an equal willingness to benefit friends, enemies, and neutrals, and this idea that all beings are as important as I am. Cherishing myself, never ever, when I look at self-centeredness, selfishness, I look at the results of it, how it feels while I'm doing it, and when I achieve my goals, I see that the results of self-centered behavior have been the problems of all of my existences. All of the downfalls I've had to experience, all of the negativities I've experienced is from self-cherishing attitude. We see this in the world. All of the wars, all of the terrible things that happen are all because of self-cherishing attitude. We see all of these negativities that arise from cherishing oneself, from being selfish. We see all the benefits from cherishing others. We see beings who cherish others more than themselves. We see His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We saw Khyentse Geshe Wandak. We saw his attitude and relationship with others and how much he loved and cherished them. And we talk about Rinpoche all the time, and everyone lights up when we say Khyentse Geshe Wandak. Many of the world beings light up when you say His Holiness the Dalai Lama's name because he's such a holy being and cares for others so much and puts others' needs before his own. And we start to see what a wonderful quality that is and how that's who we want to become. We want to be a being that cherishes others more than ourselves because we see the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude. Begin to think about taking on others' suffering. Cherishing others that much that you want to take on their suffering and give them happiness. Recognizing how putting their needs before yours is really the route to infinite happiness. If you want to become a Buddha, you have to learn how to put others' needs before your own, because it's that which gives rise to happiness in its full extent. That love and that compassion, recognizing that sentient beings have been so kind to us to provide us with all of the things that allow us to be comfortable in our lives. All of the things we use, all of the cups, the house we live in, the roof, the food that we eat. Think about how many sentient beings were involved. Think about the interdependence that we have. In order for us to be happy, we rely on so many sentient beings. And if we look at it in terms of generations and generations of beings who taught crafts and how to do certain things, and how kind they were then to be able to have shown their son or daughter how to farm and how to plant vegetables. And maybe they've passed on that sentient being you have a relationship with. You have a relationship with all sentient beings. You start to try to find the sentient beings you don't have relationships with, and you find you have a relationship with all these sentient beings, and they're so kind because they are required for your happiness. And you say, oh, I must do something. I'm going to take on myself this task. I've said, how nice it would be that sentient beings have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they have happiness in the causes of happiness. Now, I will take it upon myself the task of bringing them to a state of happiness where there are only causes of happiness. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to have the strength and courage to do so. And now I previously said, oh, how nice it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering, the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering, the causes of suffering. I will take it upon myself the task of bringing all sentient beings to a place which is free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to take on and carry out this extreme duty that I've now committed to. I have this extraordinary attitude, and I'm making a commitment that I'm going to take on myself the task of freeing them all. And we recognize at this very moment that we're not capable of doing that. We're not capable of bringing all sentient beings to a state of happiness and of freedom from suffering. We're not capable of showing them exactly what they need to do to achieve that state because we don't know exactly what we need to do to achieve that state. We know that we've taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and we take refuge in the Buddha because the Buddha is the only reliable guide. One who has woken up, a being who has gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, is the only reliable guide, the only guide who has perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, and perfect power. And we aren't that reliable guide. We recognize our inadequacy at this moment, but our desire to help everyone, and our desire to be, that comes from our desire to be free from the 6 realms of cyclic existence. So we say, may I become Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. We recognize that we must become the reliable guide, the one who transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector. To you I make prostrations. We see that the Buddha transformed into the reliable guide. May we become Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. May we transform into that reliable guide. So this is the glancing meditation. This is a type of glancing meditation we could do where we start to be able to generate renunciation and generate the idea of bodhicitta and generate the idea of the correct view of emptiness when we start to analyze that the origin of suffering is the grasping at the I and phenomena as being truly established. And whether we want to achieve the realization of an abiding nirvana, of a hero or a solitary realizer that comes from renunciation, combined with the wisdom realizing emptiness, or Buddhahood that is renunciation and bodhicitta combined with the wisdom realizing emptiness. The wisdom realizing emptiness is exactly the same. So the lack of true establishment of all phenomena is exactly the same, whatever type of liberation one wants to achieve. So this is how we would do an example of a glancing meditation on the Four Noble Truths and bodhicitta and so forth. So now imagine that from Buddha Shakyamuni, that you have now, and imagining 2 feet in front of you at eye height, about thumb size. Imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni that now explodes, thank you so much, explodes into the merit field. Imagine that now all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you. Imagine as many as you possibly can. Imagine you see Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You can start with teachers, and then you can fan it out, however you need to do it. Imagine Kensur Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Geshe Aga, imagining Geshe Mela Tenzin Ladren La, all the holy monks and nuns you can possibly imagine, Dema Locha Rinpoche, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Geshe Dorje Damdu, all these holy beings, imagining as many as you can, and Buddha Shakyamuni is still there, imagining the beings of the extensive deeds lineage, imagining the holy beings passed in that lineage that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to his Sangha, and Basubandhu and Dignaga and Darbakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyapprabha and Gunaprabha. Imagine those beings are there, the beings that taught us the vast, those beings that taught us the grounds and paths and that holy lineage of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that Kensur Geshe Wandak taught us so many times, comes from that holy lineage. The lineage of logic, of Dharmakirti and Dignaga that we learn, that allows us to be able to analyze emptiness, comes from that holy lineage. And imagine that all those beings are in the space in front of you. Imagine that the beings of the profound view lineage are in the space in front of you. Imagine that that lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, to Nagarjuna and Buddhapalita, and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Chandrashita and Baba Vega, imagining all these holy beings, Sir Limpa, Lama Sir Limpa, imagining Lord Atisha and all the Kadampa lineages, and Drone Tompa, imagining now the lineage of blessings passed down from, we see the holy beings such as Saraha and Machipa and Tilopa and Naropa and Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa, imagining these holy beings, imagining the beings that such as Padmasambhava and the Karmapa and Sachen Konga Nyingpo and Sakya Pandita, and imagining Lama Tsongkhapa and Kirtubje and Jelsupje. Imagine all all these holy beings in the space in front of you, as many as you can. They're all here. If you call them, they all come, all of these holy beings. Now imagine the highest Yoga Tantra deities, Yogic Tantra deities, Performance Tantra deities, Action Tantra deities. Imagine the 35 Buddhas. Imagine that all of the protector deities are there. Any holy beings you can imagine. All of those superior beings, imagine the space in front of you. Now imagine, so this is the merit field. Now imagine the bodhicitta field. Imagine that you have an infinite number of hands that go to all the different realms of cyclic existence. Don't leave any sentient beings out. Bring them to this teaching. Bring them to be able to experience the wisdom arisen from hearing, so they can experience the wisdom arisen from analysis, then the wisdom arisen from meditation. So bring all the hell beings, the 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, surrounding hells, hungry ghosts, animals, imagining all the animals. We have relationships with animals and we see them, so it's easy for us to visualize these animals. All the animals that live in the ground, imagining all the ants and all the slugs and all the worms and all the snakes, imagining any animals living in the ground, and imagining animals living above the ground, all of the deers and raccoons, etc. Just imagining all of the, you can imagine all of these different animals that you could bring here. Animals that are flying in the sky, just imagine all these different types of animals that you bring here, imagining as many as you can to be able to engage in a pathway which will allow them to achieve fearlessness and infinite happiness. You said, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. You know that in order to become a Buddha yourself, you have to listen to the teachings, you have to recite the prayers, you have to have accumulation of merit and purification, and have the wisdom arisen from hearing, contemplation and meditation. And you know that the only thing that you can really do at this stage for all sentient beings is bring them to the same place that you are, because you want them to achieve the same goal that you want to achieve, fearlessness and infinite happiness. So now you have all of the animals here. Now imagine that you bring all the human beings here. Don't have any bias whatsoever. We just went over that friends, enemies, and neutrals were childish labels and have an equal willingness to benefit all sentient beings. Imagine that every single human being now has been brought to this teaching. Imagine that all the demigods are brought to this teaching. Imagine that all of the gods, the desire realm gods, the eight form realm gods, four form realm gods, four formless realm gods, all of these gods are brought here. Many of these beings believe they're liberated. Imagine that out of your great compassion, out of your desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, out of understanding that you have to get rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, you have compassion for these beings who are in these higher realms that think they're already liberated, and you bring them here. Now the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are full of bliss and happiness because they see that all sentient beings are here. Their only goal is to somehow bring every single being, the vast number of beings, every single one of them, from wherever they are at this very moment, to the state of Buddhahood, where there's fearlessness and infinite happiness. And now all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas see that all sentient beings are here and doing exactly what they had in mind. So an amount of bliss just starts to cause an eruption of light rays and nectars, white, red, and blue light rays and nectars, symbolizing method, wisdom, and purification. Now imagine that you and all sentient beings have at your crown a white Om, at your throat a red Ah, and at your heart a blue Hum, symbolizing body, speech, and mind respectively. You and all sentient beings have these identical images, and you, out of your love and compassion for all sentient beings, see the need for them to generate this Om Ah Hum. And out of that power of your love and compassion for them, and out of the fact that all phenomena dependently originate, all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, from that emptiness you imagine that these Om Ah Hum syllables now are on yours and all sentient beings' crowns, throats, and hearts. Imagine now that the bubbling of the light rays and nectars comes to its full extent, and then white light rays and nectar start to shower down on you and all sentient beings and transform into white Oms, dissolve into the crown at your head and all sentient beings' crowns, and purify your body. Imagine red light rays and nectars shower down and transform into red Ahs, dissolve into the red Ah at your throat and all sentient beings' throats, and purify your speech. Imagine that blue light rays and nectars from the bliss of the merit field shower down on you and all sentient beings and dissolve into the Hum at your heart and all sentient beings' hearts, and purify yours and all sentient beings' minds. Now imagine that the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas and you and all sentient beings are abiding just for a moment in a state of the perfection of wisdom, perfection of love, perfection of compassion, perfection of power, perfection of skillful means. You will become a Buddha. You will achieve this state when you get rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. And now just imagine what that would be like just for a moment. Imagine that you and all sentient beings have this state of perfection. Okay. Now we'll recite the Heart Sutra in English. Again, imagine that all sentient beings are reciting the Heart Sutra with you. All sentient beings are thinking about the emptiness of objective existence, the emptiness of inherent existence, the emptiness of intrinsic existence, the emptiness of purity. We have to see that things dependently originate, therefore they're empty of inherent existence, and find the middle way between nihilism and permanence. That is the trick. It sounds easy, but after all of these decades of meditating on emptiness, I still find it to be a very, very slippery subject that I have to continue to investigate. And if you are really looking to thoroughly investigate emptiness, look at the 20 emptinesses. Look at Illuminating the Intent by Lama Tsongkhapa, the commentary on Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatara. Look at Lama Tsongkhapa's Ocean of Reasoning, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Nagarjuna's root wisdom text, the Muya Madhyamika Karika. Look at the Leishi Nimpo, the Essence of Eloquence, where Lama Tsongkhapa expands upon the Madhyamika view so clearly, and the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And we find so many incredible texts that will help us to decipher this middle way consequence view, and it's so subtle. And I really encourage all of you never to be satisfied with partial instructions. Be able to identify what subjective conventional existence means, and how it depends upon a very specific picture that you're seeing, and only you're seeing your specific picture that you're seeing. You're believing that everything inherently exists as you actually bring it into being through the power of a name, through imputation, as Rinpoche would say. There's some stuff that serves as a basis of designation, collection of parts that serves as a basis of designation for a name. And subjectively, we're collecting that outer material and then making a picture that our karma is allowing us to see, and then labeling it. And it's our own specific picture. Your picture and my picture doesn't have the exact same picture. My taste buds don't like the same thing your taste buds like. That food that is external that I put in my mouth isn't the same one you like. It doesn't have an inherent existence. It's subjectively, I collect it, I see, oh, that's a mushroom. I don't like mushrooms. And then that picture in my mind is something that I push away from and find disgust. And find that has this nature from its own side of disgustingness, because the picture in my mind told me so. The conceptual stuff that I threw together real quick, when I wasn't looking. Really, all this stuff I threw together in my mind real quick when I wasn't looking makes me believe that things objectively exist out there. And how they really exist, because they do exist, is what we need to find out. And this is what the Buddha teaches in the Heart Sutra. The Buddha teaches explicitly in this very summarized text that things don't objectively exist. There's no objectively existent eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, appearance, sound, smell, taste. And even says that the Four Noble Truths are not objectively existent, which changes his tune a little from the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. So we have to be very careful and very good students and study well and know what we're looking at when we start to determine whether this is a final presentation of emptiness, or there's been too much taken away or not enough taken away. And when we get to that sweet spot, just right, like the three bears, this one's just right, we'll find that everything functions just fine. Things exist just fine. Karma and its results. When I do wrong, pain will come. When I do right, happiness will come. But none of it is truly existent. When I can see all of that together and live in there somehow in the middle without grasping at one extreme or the other, then I've realized what the Buddha is talking about in the Heart Sutra. But until then, if there's any inkling of substantial existence, if you think your mind inherently exists, well, it must. If it's all coming from my mind, it must inherently exist. That's not there yet. The Chittamantrans say something like that, the mind-only school, but they're wrong. And they're negated later on, by the Madhyamika Svatantrika and Madhyamika Prasangika. So we have to know what all that means, because generally speaking, when we look at, if we aren't have these incredible imprints, like these yogis just popping out, and we just understand emptiness so clearly, generally speaking, most of us don't really have the middle way consequence view. I don't mean haven't seen it. Most of us don't hold it. Most of us still have something in there that we're believing in, and we don't even necessarily know it. And when we study the tenets, we see, oh, well, that seems like a viable stance, but it's wrong. So if it seems viable, am I at a little lower layer of my thinking, just holding on to it, if it seems so viable when I read it? If the wrong thing seems so viable when I read it, if things in the Lam Rim Chemo, when I see objection and there's all these debates that take place, if sometimes I can't differentiate between what's right and what's the wrong stance, it means that I'm probably holding on to a wrong stance. So this is how we use the mirror of the Dharma to see if we understand the Heart Sutra. We start to get into the weeds with Lama Tsongkhapa in the special insights section and see, if this just reads like, the Sunday paper, or if this starts to torture our minds to the point of closing the book. Because reading Lama Tsongkhapa's 20 emptinesses found in Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way, for someone who understands the Heart Sutra, is like reading the Sunday paper. Oh yeah, the 20, and this is emptiness of, inner emptiness, outer emptiness, emptiness of inner and outer emptiness, emptiness of ultimate truth, all these things, just, totally clear. Just like reading the Sunday paper, but if you're like me, it's not like that. It becomes frustrating. At first you're running, you're going along, seeming like you get it, and then there's some sort of spoke goes into the wheel where it starts to not make sense. And it starts to say, well then, if it's a projection of my mind, how are we saying there's external phenomena? And the mind-only school starts to make a lot of sense and starts to make more and more sense the more you study mind-only. But then you realize that there is this external phenomena and there can't be this inherently existent thing, because that has consequences. So I just encourage you to not just say, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, because it dependently originates. It's not truly established. Next, what the implications of that are in terms of your reaction to your world are huge if you really get this part of how everything is coming, there aren't any external things in terms of the way you believe them to sit there as this or that, as this findable object over there, this chair I'm looking at right there. My mind thinks that in order for me to say that's a chair, it's got to have some chairness over there. And that's not, there's got to be something chairnessy that's making me say that's chair and not the sandals I'm looking at. They got to have sandalness. There's got to be something there, sandalnessy. There's got to be a defining characteristic over there. How can it be? Because I could just put my dog on my foot and walk around. This is where it gets tricky, and it's coming from my mind. So, is my shoe a shoe for everyone? No, it's not big enough. It's not everyone's shoe, and not everyone needs shoes. Not everyone would see it as a shoe. Khaled chews on my shoes and thinks they're toys. So the findability starts to shake up. But then why do I think it's a shoe, and it seems like it's definitely a shoe, but then Kala doesn't put it on her foot. She runs around and chews it like a bone. What does she think it is? Who's right? The subjects that in their worlds of karma view are identifying things as things suitably to be called this or that. For Kala, it's suitable to be a chew toy because her subjective experience of my shoe is a chew toy. She's not wrong. She's not right that there's an objectively existent chew toy, but from her side, it's a chew toy. From my side, it's a shoe. I put it on, it works. But objectively, from its own side, it's not a shoe or a chew toy because it can't be both. It has to just be dependent origination. So this is what the Heart Sutra is talking about. And then implicitly talking about what the 100,000 verse, 20,000 verse, and 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are talking more about, and that's the Bodhisattva paths. The 5 paths, the path of accumulation, preparation, meditation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning, and the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. That when one gets through all of that, 5 paths and 10 grounds, he or she is a Buddha in the Mahayana. So that's what this is talking about. This is talking about the paths and grounds necessary to become a Buddha and the nature of those paths and grounds, the bases, the conventional and ultimate truth of those paths and grounds, right? And so the conventional truth, the concealed truth, is the subjective existence, and then the ultimate truth is the lack of inherent existence. So this is language that we have to know what it means, not just say it. Know what that means. It doesn't have objective existence. Why? Because it's a chew toy and a shoe. But it's subjective existence. Why? Because it's a chew toy and a shoe. It's not ultimately existent because it's not a chew toy or a shoe. It's just dependent origination. But subjectively, it can be a chew toy or a shoe. But ultimately, it's not a chew toy or a shoe. Because why? It can't be both a chew toy and a shoe. It's just dependent origination. So it's a very coarse way of looking at the Heart Sutra. But I wanted to share that with some folks on some other apps. And I'm sure that, even that style, someone could walk in the room right now, a geshe, with me saying these things so wonderfully and say, well, what about this? Or snap a finger. Usually the older geshes don't clap anymore. They lean over and they go like that, snap their finger, like Geshe Lobsang Gompo used to, and then point at you. And when the point comes that you just said something, that you're about to get, there's a train coming down the tracks and you're in a tunnel and you see the light coming and you're about to get clobbered. So you never be super confident unless you have calm abiding and special insight, and you really, really don't be confident with your view of emptiness. Be ready to have it smashed at any moment. Okay, so let's get into the Heart Sutra. And I think all of these things are really important. And when I think of them, I don't want to forget them. And these are things that have really influenced my mind over the years. Because I don't have shamatha yet, my mind can go here and go there. So when I grab something that I think everybody, would maybe benefit from because it benefited me, and if you're like me, then it maybe will benefit you, I like to share that. So I apologize if I went on too long before we even start the teaching sometimes. But the teaching is the teaching. The minute that I'm recording in progress, that's the teaching. And Pabunka Rinpoche said, when someone said to him, your introduction, your introductory prayers, and you talk about them, it's just too long. Get to the teaching. And he said, well, it would just ruin everything if I did that. We wouldn't be successful if I went about it like that. So no, that is the teaching. That's the teaching, and that's the teaching, and that's the teaching. I really feel that it's so important to kind of get to this place where we're like, okay, I want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And I understand what that emptiness of inherent existence kind of refers to, because I'm going to need that wisdom because that's a liberator. But I'm going to need that bodhicitta because that's what kind of is a ripening quality. So the wisdom's the liberator. It liberates you either in abiding nirvana or a Buddhahood. But the ripener is either it's going to be renunciation alone and you're going to be thrown into an abiding nirvana, or it's going to be renunciation in bodhicitta and you'll be a bodhisattva and you'll be a Buddha. So if you don't know how all this package fits together and know how to glance meditation in and on your mind and know where you're at through the mirror of the Dharma, so you can go back and, after your glance meditation, figure out where you are on the path and analyze it and analyze it and analyze it, as Pabunka says, until it goes from correctly assuming consciousness to inference. We really have to practice this over and over again. So anyway, Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Deyata onga de ga de Bharagade Bharazam Gadi Bodhisvadyada Om Gade Gade Bharagade Bharazam Gadi Bodhisvadyada Om Gade Gade Bharagade Bharazangadi Bodhisvanyata Om Gade Gade Bharagade Bharazangadi Bodhisvanyata Om Gade Gade Bharagade Bharazam Gadi Bodhisva. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jube ne jo damba ne nguje du ju ngai du do jen dru babo la mai bujinzi ne zung gandro zola jatselo aga samara de jandara samara ebe aga samara de jandara samara ebe aga samara. Agasamara Dajadara Samara Yamedi Aton Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Buddhizo Baba Gonja Sonjiga Demedoji Lobodoji Mebodoji Shewadoji Dragi Baji Medemeji Andi Jedin Gorie Zoha Gerin Junja Shewada Midun Bejan Danjawadan Tumba Dunjin Bonzon Zonjoji Tashi De Jandenda de Lejo. Now make an outer mandal offering as a request for teaching, imagining a perfect universe, sentient beings in perfection, happy, offering this to all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gam Niradayami. Zanye Jadan Jayi Janala Janju Badu Danyi Jasuchi Dagi Chishi Jibezunanji Dala Benji Zanye Dubarjo Zanye Jadan Jayi Janala Janju Badu Danyi Jasuchi Dagi Chishi Jibezunanji Dala Benji Zanye Dubarjo Zanye Jadan Jayi Janala Janju Badu Danyi Jasuji Dagi Jushe Jibezananji Drola Benji Zanje Drubarjo. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. The one who transformed into a reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata and protector, to you I make prostrations. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forever, forever noble light rays, to you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Here we are again, everyone. Sunday. So happy. We're I geshe ma Tenzin Ladrin la. The other morning back said it feels like she won the lottery. Like, what more could we want out of a human basis? We have teachers, we have the ability to read the stuff, We have a way to have fearlessness eventually and infinite happiness. Like, what more could we want? And how many, billions of people don't have access to this thing that we have, and we don't need anything more of then? How many sentient beings can say that they have everything that they need? And we can truly say that if we analyze the Dharma that we've been presented with. We really have everything that we need. Because what we need is to no longer suffer again. No longer have 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings. That's what we really need. And what we really want is infinite happiness or bliss. That's what it is. And we have all of the answers in front of us. Khenser Geshe Wandak was so kind to us. He brought us from the very, very beginning by the hand and said, oh, this is why Atisha is so great, when he showed us the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And he taught us Atisha's lamp first, if you remember. But when he got to here, he took us so kindly by the hand, and he would repeat himself over and over and over again, to the point where people would say, oh my gosh, I'm like, I don't want to, seriously. And I'd feel the same way too. I'm not going to pretend I'm like, Mr. Special. I'd be like, oh, here he goes again. Virtue causes happiness. 10 non-virtues, 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, 3 of the mind. Here we go again. We're going to spend 20 minutes on this today. I see. We did that last time too. Okay, we're going to do that again. And I maybe didn't appreciate it as much at the time because I would get frustrated, as I didn't appreciate the introductory prayers as much at the time. Whereas today, I could literally just read like some of the prayers, not say a word, and feel satisfied in a complete way, like getting up and leaving and just feeling totally satisfied. Even if I didn't hear anything, I find that thing that Lama Tsongkhapa says happens, where things become instructions for practice. When it happens, it's so wonderful. It really, really is. It really is. And so many years we were able to hear these things and see later on how this repetition was so that we'd get that this is an instruction for practice. And I always tell that story that I'd been a Buddhist over a decade, and I remember, and I'd been a vegetarian for much longer than that. I'd been a vegetarian, 5 years before I became even Buddhist. And I, was involved in animal rights activism, all these things. So I'm just trying to set the stage of who I thought I was and how I thought I cared for sentient beings. And one day, I was driving on Green Hill Road in Madison, Connecticut, and a coyote ran out in front of my car. And I remember this really weird thing that took place in my mind. It was almost slow motion, where I said I abandoned killing, moo. It was almost this thing that happened where it was an active, we can say don't kill, but there's an active state of non-killing that if it's present in your mind, it's reflexive. When virtue becomes saturated in your mind, and it is, as Atisha was, almost perfect all the time, it's just like a natural for it to occur in terms of the potency of thought. It's not just, oh, it's an animal. It's I don't kill, that's an animal. And I saw that happen in my mind. And it really hasn't happened so much lately. My spiritual realizations are a little like that, and they don't come around too often. But when they do, I really pay attention to it. And I saw how, wow, I've been studying these 10 non-virtues. Rinpoche keeps repeating these 10 non-virtues, and he says that in order for me to have a good next life, you have to have the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtues, and you have to go for refuge, and then acknowledge your downfalls. And I saw, as I was thinking after, wait, okay, so if I have the ethics that is abandoning and it's active, then I don't have anything to acknowledge and any downfalls to acknowledge. Because in terms of that specific instant. So there was really a lot more efficiency that I started to see in, not having to like do a 4-opponent power. If this efficiency of mind, of this like active abandonment could be present, then there would be a lot of more free time to do something to make my mind even more efficient, as opposed to having to go back and be like, okay, all right, I got to fix this with the 4-opponent powers, which of course makes my mind more efficient. I understand that. But if I could somehow saturate my mind with this behavior, modification, intention, technically speaking, basubandhu, the intention comes and then our body and our speech starts going. If I can somehow get to the intention part, and I can somehow get control of my mind, if I can get my mind calm enough to keep my mindfulness throughout my daily life, and I could do that with all ethics. If I could have that ethics that swerved right when I want to start gossiping, that's another animal. Sure, killing, because I'm like before I was even Buddhist, I wasn't a killer. So that was an easy one for me to realize. But it was such a gift because it was realized. And I saw how it related to all the things that I didn't. And I don't know if that was when I think it was before that, but that I started seeing like everything in the Lam Rim really as something I could practice. Should practice, not could practice. But it really started to make sense, and it was because of the kindness of Rinpoche and these little experiences that I had. So imagine if you could do that with gossip, or the first Bodhisattva vow, not criticizing others in any way. Imagine if my mind naturally just wouldn't know how to do that. Imagine if it just forgot how to do that because it only knew how to not criticize others. That's that mitonshu Rinpoche always talked about, the opposite. Making your mind not even know how to do that anymore. And once it doesn't know how to do it anymore, it doesn't do it anymore. That's being a little coarse, right? Doesn't know how to do it anymore. A Buddha's omniscient. The Buddha knows everything, right? But you know what I'm getting at. Like your mind just doesn't do it anymore because it's got the opposite. It's doing the opposite. My mind's doing opposite of criticizing others at all times. And if your mind's doing opposite of the things, you shouldn't be doing at all times, there's a lot more room to meditate and get concentration. And that's why ethics is the foundation. Imagine if your mind was only good and wasn't caught in all this stuff. Imagine if you could just be saturated like that, how much calmer your mind could be. Think about what guilt does to your mind. Think about just complete peace of mind. Think about how much easier it'd be to meditate if your conscience was clear, as we say. Well, as you get more and more ethically evolved, that's what occurs. That clear conscience allows you to get calm abiding, shamatha. But without it, you'll never get shamatha. You go to as many retreats as you want and breathe in and out as many times as you want. If you're acting like a jerk in life, you will not get shamatha. You may get something you think shamatha. You may get into some of the stages and play around in there. You may get your endorphins going and feel high because you breathe a lot, in and out, fast. But you won't get shamatha without ethical behavior. And without shamatha, you will not see emptiness. And if you don't see emptiness, you will not cut the root of cyclic existence and you will be reborn again. You will have attachment, and if you have attachment, Rinpoche said, you will be reborn again. What's a sign you're going to have another birth? Lay on your deathbed. Do I have attachment or not? Oh, I do. Well, you're going to be reborn. Correct sign. 100%. How do I get rid of attachment? I get rid of, at an ultimate level, the attachment to myself. I have to get rid of the self-grasping ignorance. It's from that self-grasping ignorance that then I'm like, oh, I'm great. I'm addicted to me. I cherish myself more than you. Game on. Whatever it takes to make me happy, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever it takes to get things that make me unhappy away from me, even if it means punching, that's what I'm going to do. And all the while, I'm misapprehending and misjudging everything around me. Okay, so let's get into this. So when we look at virtue and non-virtue, we're currently in the section on karma. We went over the general karmas, and then we get into the specifics of karma, and we get into the 10 paths of action of karma, and we've been going through the 10 virtuous actions. 10 non-virtues actually is what we're going through. And they're opposites, the mitungshu, the difference. The opposite is the virtue. So the ethics that abandons killing is the opposite. Killing is the non-virtue. Ethics that abandons killing is the virtue. And it's that active state I just talked about. Like when I, swerved but knew I was doing it to not kill somehow. And that I actively just didn't do that. It's not something I did. So that's the place that we want to get to, and we want to get to that in relation if we want a high status, because we're in the small scope section. So if we don't become a Buddha by the time we're dead, and we don't die if we have become a Buddha, right? And maybe we shuck this stuff off, but we don't actually die. But if we haven't, achieved nirvana of some sort, arhatship of some style, by the time we're done with this life, we're going to, take on another birth. And Nagarjuna says that if we want high status in the precious garland, that we have to engage in the 16 virtues. And among those 16 virtues are the 10, ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtues, or the 10 non-virtues to abstain from. And those are considered in Nagarjuna's text, white paths of action as virtue, dark paths of action are non-virtues. And then, so we see those, the way that it's broken down. But we're dealing with the 10 non-virtues right now. And I believe that we finished lying. So let's move on to divisive speech. Not so simple. We're getting into, we're starting to move into the grounds where it becomes more and more complicated. And this is why we investigate what ethics is and what the definition of each of these is. And we look in the mirror and say, okay, it's defined as this. We can see how that hurts others if I do that. So, okay, that definition's fine. Even though I may not like it, it's fine. And then we look in the mirror and say, do I do that? And I think this is one that is hard not to do at times, because we will tell ourselves that we are not engaging in it for anything else than like compassion or understanding, or to describe a situation, when really we're trying to describe a situation and kind of influence the person we're describing it to agree with the way that we saw the situation went down. And if it's in relation to we disagreed with someone else, we are really trying hard to make sure that the participant in our conversation agrees that, yeah, you're right, that person is wrong in some way. So really, when we look at the definition of divisive speech in the Dharma, we see it's taking people who are compatible and making them incompatible. How many times have we been around, people that, have compatibility, and, you say, the other day, Larry said this to me. I don't really know what he's thinking. And you're trying to get that person to be like, Larry sometimes is kind of crazy. I don't know why he said that to you. It's very easy to go from gossiping, useless talk, and transform your gossip, which is a little lighter. We're going to gossip more than we're going to divisive speech. Because gossip's basically talking about things that aren't meaningful. What's meaningful? The Dharma. Whoa. Uh-oh. So we'll get into that later. But think about how easy it is to just be casually talking, and then just start to, talk about, the other day, I couldn't believe it. It starts with something like that. The other, I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that they did this. They're not usually like this. And I read in other books not related to Buddhism, it's like where you're trying to pretend, you want to have a better understanding of the person. The two of you are just trying to get a better. So this is why I'm presenting with you with the fact that this guy's a jerk. It's so we can understand their jerkness better out of compassion, and usually 9 times out of 10, it's so that we are pushed up higher. And then what we're doing is we're making the person we're telling bad things about someone else less compatible with that person. And if we want to become a Buddha, we have to have compatibility with all sentient beings. So the minute we start dividing, what's happening? Biased. And when biased is happening, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. What is that? That's not even close to true. For the sake of all sentient beings. I want to make this person incompatible with you. So we see how this is introductory small scope, but this keeps us from being bodhisattvas. This keeps us from getting to a point of renunciation. It keeps us, it hinders us. All of these actions in this diluted way of behaving and thinking keep us from being holy beings. And the more we can take the mindfulness now. Okay, Lama Tsongkhapa has handed us mindfulness. Khenser Geshe Wandak handed us mindfulness. Mindfulness is not forgetting our object. What are we not supposed to forget? We're not supposed to forget that we're not supposed to divide people. We're not supposed to lie. We're not supposed to forget that. So our mindfulness now is the mirror of the Dharma, Our introspection seeing, are we doing it? The mirror of the Dharma knows what you're supposed to be doing, knows what the mindfulness is. That spy at our mind, that introspector is seeing. Are you doing it? Are you not killing? Are you not stealing? Are you not committing adultery or lying or dividing people? Are you doing that? Because if you are doing that, then you're causing more samsara. You're causing more suffering. So we know that there have to be, for the completion, there have to be those things present. So with divisive speech, we just read the whole thing, it's short. The basis of divisive speech are living beings who are compatible or incompatible. Of the 3 aspects of the category of attitude, the perception of the affliction are as before. The motivation is the desire that living beings who are compatible be separated, or the desire that living beings who are incompatible remain so. So interesting. This isn't about just making beings who are compatible incompatible. This says making incompatible beings remain incompatible by reinforcing why they think they're incompatible, why they think they should be biased. So we're reinforcing their bias. We want to help all sentient beings. All sentient beings have to have not bias to have fearlessness and infinite happiness. Now we're reinforcing their bias. So we could be trying to make them bias or reinforcing their bias. And this is all divisive speech. And it's I remember, we were all talking, after Rinpoche passed, and a lot of this went on. And it's because, we have delusions, I'm as guilty as everyone is as guilty because, it's such a hard thing when we get emotional to not do. When we get emotional, it's very hard to not start pointing fingers and try to figure out why we're suffering and come up with a reason other than the real reason that because we previously created karma, that and not to come up with the real reason. We're always looking for external enemies to blame when the internal enemy of our attachment, hatred, and ignorance is the only one to blame. So the self-cherishing attitude starts just getting so fearful and so worried and just starts saying, well, my view is the right view, and I got to make sure I get as many people to agree that my view is the right view, because if I don't, then I don't know what's going to happen. The whole world just may end if I don't get as many people as possible to agree with me. And we see this in politics. It's really hard. How could you, how could you even be a politician and not just make this your full-time job? to divide and try to manipulate sentient beings so that we're broken into groups. But the Buddha doesn't have groups. The Buddha doesn't have bias. You want to be like the Buddha, then you can't have groups. You can't separate sentient beings into us and them, and because as soon as you start doing that, friends, enemies, and neutrals is on high octane. And if you got friends, enemies, and neutrals on high octane and you're talking about bodhicitta, that's like 20 steps before. Equanimity is a pre-step. They don't even include it in the steps to bodhicitta, in the 7-point cause and effect. They're like, whoa, there's a pre-step. If you have this bias, and how do you know if you have this bias? Are you dividing people? All of these foundational teachings serve to allow you to become a Buddha. So this abandoning divisive speech allows you to achieve the completion stage of highest yoga tantra. Because you would be able to see all sentient beings without bias that you want to have bliss. You wouldn't be able, there wouldn't be any, you would have this, every sentient being, the ones we can't even count. You would have to want them to have bliss. You would have to be a Buddha. You'd have to want everyone at the completion stage to have bliss. So you have to not divide people. You have to make people compatible. That's what bodhisattvas do. They make people compatible. And this is when we start to learn this and start to meditate more and more on this and start to see the error of our ways. It's embarrassing. But that embarrassment is the regret of the 4 opponent powers that says, I don't want to do this anymore. It shouldn't stay shame because it's past. Well, what are you doing right now? Are you doing something shameful? Regret is something that you can have. Regret having done, because that stamps your mind that I don't want to do this. You take refuge in the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas and generate bodhicitta and, have some sort of opponent and make a commitment to not do these things again. But divisive speech is a real tough one, and we do it a lot. And we do it like just to tell a story. And we don't necessarily need to give, all the details that would make the person we're telling the story to think that the person the story is about, did something, is a jerk or something. You can, but then there's a fine line because you have to, be honest and tell facts. So you have to check your mind. You only know if you're trying to, be make people compatible, not compatible, or incompatible, stay incompatible. But the only way you'll really be able to be honest with yourself is if you're meditating, calming your mind down, studying, and being willing to be honest. It's that honesty with ourselves that, that I can say, I engage in divisive speech. How do I know it? Because I've checked my mind and I've thought about it. I sat down on my cushion and I've analyzed this. Yeah. Was I trying to unite? Could I have united better? Because if not, I can't get bodhicitta. So these are things that we cannot just say, these are the beginning little topics that are so easy. You want to actively abandon killing, actively abandoning stealing in a very, very clear way, actively abandoning sexual misconduct. Am I doing things over and over again to make myself more attached, more angry, and more ignorant? Or am I doing things over and over again that make me less attached, less angry, and less ignorant? It's really that simple. We watch our mind, and these guideposts are in the Lam Rim Chemo and in the sutras that the Buddha taught. Abandon all non-virtue, engage in perfect virtues, subdue your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha didn't say subdue your mind and then abandon non-virtue. The Buddha knew you couldn't subdue your mind without abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue, because you can't get concentration without abandoning non-virtue. And you can't subdue your mind without a union of calm abiding and special insight. So the Buddha told us right in that one stanza in the Vinaya that we have to engage in ethical behavior if we want to subdue our mind. In Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Avatara, in the section on ethics, we see the perfection of ethics, where it talks about that all of the ordinary high status, all the ordinary happinesses, and the ordinary realizations or the realizations of the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas or Buddhas, all come from the foundation of ethical behavior. So no matter where you search in Buddhism, whatever realization you're trying to achieve, whether it's the pre-path realization of higher realm rebirth or path realization of abiding nirvana or non-abiding nirvana, you will be required to be clean, ethically pure. And that's why monks and nuns take hundreds of vows. And they watch their mind and they try to abstain from every little thing that could harm a sentient being or make them more attached or angry. They really, really try. They really, really try to just focus on the task at hand and not wander around at, the world. They try. We should really do the same. We should really try to cultivate that mindfulness that says, yes, my mindfulness is, what's the focal object that I'm not supposed to forget? Mindfulness is not forgetting the object. I'm not supposed to forget that I should abandon the 3 non-virtues of the mind, 4 non-virtues of the body, and 3 non-virtues of the speech, Let me try that again. I screwed that all up. The mindfulness is that I shouldn't forget that my focal object, my object of not forgetting is the 3 non-virtues of the body, 4 non-virtues of the speech, and 3 non-virtues of the mind. So introspection, spying your mind a little bit. You can use it like this. Am I doing that in my daily life? Am I keeping that mindfulness? Am I keeping the ethics that abandons killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct? Am I keeping the ethics that abandons lying, divisive speech, harsh words, and gossip? Am I keeping the ethics that watches my mind so closely that I don't allow it to covet or have harmful intent or wrong view? This is the mindfulness. The spy in our mind is seeing. Am I keeping these ethics? And if we are, we've got a darn good shot at moving forward on the path. If we are not, and we're just doing whatever we want willy-nilly, but studying, and we maybe are intelligent, so we sound like we know a bunch of stuff, it was not going to be stuff that works. And the Buddha Dharma is something that's supposed to transform our mind from a sullied state to a pure state, from a state where there are afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience to the state of Buddha. All of the things that Buddha ever taught were, direct ways or side-by ways to get to Buddhahood. There's one path according to the great texts, and when we look at it at the final view, and that's the path to Buddhahood. Some of the paths, point over to Buddhahood. Others get you a little closer and then get you a guide to Buddhahood, and other paths get you exactly to Buddhahood. But they're all pathways to Buddhahood, whether here is solitary realizer or the Bodhisattva vehicle. All of these will eventually lead the being to complete Buddhahood, because all sentient beings will be Buddha. And the Buddha has said that I will liberate all sentient beings and won't stop until I do. And even the beings in an abiding nirvana of a here and solitary realizer are sentient beings. So the Buddha has committed to free them from the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, bring them to a state of Buddhahood. Therefore, those beings are in a prime state because they've already seen emptiness. They have a cessation of suffering. To then, as sharp, practitioners, then do the Bodhisattva path. Even though it'll take them longer than someone who started on the Mahayana path, they will eventually become Buddhas too. And it's going to take us doing all of this foundational practice sooner or later in order for us to achieve those realizations. So I think that I'll end there today. I've been on a little marathon again today with, I got up at 4 actually, and did practices, and then prepared a little bit, and then Geshe Dorje Damdu, the semester started again. So that's great. We're studying tenet systems. We're studying the Sautrantika view, the Sutra school view of tenets right now. We finished Vibhashika and we finished Low Rig Mind and its functions. And it's really amazing to see how complex the Dharma is and how complex selflessness is, and how it's even hard to posit the selflessness of the lower vehicles in terms of person. When you start to look at it and you start to unwind and unravel it, it's more subtle than you would think, because you call it lower. So whenever you hear lower in Buddhism, if Buddha taught it, make like an asterisk. Because if Buddha taught it, it's probably pretty profound. And Buddha said, it's for ordinary people that I teach kind of advice, but it's for the yogis that I teach the tenets. And then when we hear like lesser and greater, we're talking tenets, talking to yogis. So I don't know. I'm not a yogi. I'd like to be. I saw one in my house, in our house. I know what they look like and act like. And I was thinking like how wonderful it is. And this is the last thing I'll say, how beautiful a blessing it is that I don't know in your case, but I really feel like I was able to realize the first topic of the Lam Rim, that the source of all my good is the Lama. And how incredible it is. I was thinking about what a blessing this part is. When we talk about ordinary appearances, don't even talk about emptiness, okay? Not even talking about emptiness. Begin to be able to see the teacher, as having all of these excellent qualities, and then beginning to be able to see, the teacher as the Buddha. Is just such like a profound thing that occurs when we engage in these practices, and you see how if you could have this relationship with this topic and start to have it saturate your mind and transform what ordinarily looks like a 300-pound man in your mind, seeing them as inseparable from a 16-year-old girl, you start to really see how Guru devotion allows you to start ripping ordinary appearances apart. Really, before understanding how, appearances, can be deceptive. You start to be able to see that when you see the teacher, and you see the teacher having these qualities that you slowly can be able to understand more and more and more. So fortunate to have had Khyentse Geshe Wandak for 25 years, next to me and next to all of you for many of those years. And I see so many of you that were affected by him. And now people on all these other applications are becoming affected by Khyentse Geshe Wandak a little bit at a time, because they see that there's something here. This doesn't sound like a lot of the other nonsense that I heard before for some reason. This guy sure talks a lot, but there's something. I know you know it. I know you do. There's something more there than a lot of the nonsense you normally listen to. I know you can hear it. I know you know that when you look around, there's more to it than you think. You can't be so egotistical to think that all there is to it is your car and the spray you put around the tires of your 20-inch rims and the system that goes boom, boom, boom in your trunk, like I thought was all there was to it when I was younger. But I kept not believing it, and I don't think you believe it either. Anyway, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there's no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. And again, that's the end verse in Nagarjuna's root wisdom text, the Mulya Madhyamika Karika. And he shows how kind the Buddha was to us to be able to come and show us the middle way, free from the extreme of nihilism and substantialism. And until Nagarjuna came in our world, those precious teachings had been hidden and lost because the world didn't have enough virtue or enough real, pure intelligence to be able to comprehend that things exist but don't inherently exist. So Nagarjuna was so kind to show us how the Buddha didn't teach any perverted views and showed how everything has this middle way. And Nagarjuna elucidated it so clearly when he presents that middle way consequence view that I pray all of you and myself can realize one day. So we'll do the concluding mandala offering. thanksgiving for the teaching, offering a perfect universe to the teacher and to the lineage all the way back to Lord Buddha. And if you are hearing a teaching that better in our tradition in terms of these kind of teachings trace back to Lord Buddha. Some of the Tibetan traditions, I don't know anything about that stuff. But in terms of this, what I want to listen to, it better trace back to Lord Buddha. And I can say the information that I presented you with today is traceable back 100% beyond the shadow of a doubt to Buddha Shakyamuni 2,600 years ago in an unbroken lineage. So let's pay some respect to that incredible lineage that have beings in it like Kensur Geshe Wandak and Kensur Pema Jetsun and Shako Gen Nima and Gen Lapchala and Gen Uzela and all of these Trijung Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche and Pobunka Rinpoche and Dapo Rinpoche, all of these holy lamas. You keep going back. You can keep going back. The 13th Dalai Lama and all these holy beings we've heard of. 7th Dalai Lama and and the 3rd Dalai Lama and the 1st Dalai Lama and Panchen Sonandrapa. All of these beings are part of this royal lineage that got dropped in our lap because of some beautiful karma we created. Like a flash of lightning in the dark. We're right here. And we're in front of this beautiful lineage. And may this beautiful lineage continue to be in our lives. And may we never sully it. And may we carry this lineage on and teach it to others. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa, to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Sumantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Remember anyone in your prayers that you want to pray for and dedicate the virtue towards if they've passed away or if they're sick. I know my wife Lori Rankin, we just had a PET scan and there's quite a bit of radioactive activity in various places on her body, so it could mean something very terrible, might not mean something very terrible. So please keep her in your prayers. Those of you who have been following this have followed this from lung cancer to skin cancer to brain tumor to spots on liver and lung, and now there's radioactive activity in those spots areas. So again, there can be without it being malignant. But please keep her in your prayers. Keep Beauregard in your prayers. Keep all sentient beings in your prayers, please. And in the Pure Land surrounded by snowy mountains, hold on. Any mistakes that I've made in this teaching, may they be purified through this mantra. Om benza sato samaya minupalaya benza sato seno bajista dida me baba sutukaya me baba supukaya me baba anurada me baba savaziri me viraja savakama suchi me kijam shiyan kuruhum ha bhagavan savadata kata benza mama moka benza bava maha samaya safa om fe. May we all be protected by Palden Lamo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Long Jo Jo Rama Jo Rama Jo Rama Tunja Kalarachimo Rama Chadacha Tunja Ruler Hong Jo Hong. May Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings flourish and always remain in the world until samsara's end. Mime zewe tuchin chenrezi, dreme jembe wambo jambe tipo male jumze zawe da kanchin kepe zochin Tsongkhapa, lozandrabi shala zoadeb. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. Gangri rawe gorwe shinyandir vendan dewa malu jongwe ne Chenrezi wandenzin yazo yijabezide bardu den yoji and all of our lives. May we never be separated from Kensur Geshe Wandak. May we accumulate everything necessary to keep that relationship, all of the causes and conditions, whether we meet him or her in the emanation body in normal realms, or the Sambhogakaya when we become Arya Bodhisattvas. May we never sever this relationship and always meet with this perfect Lama until we become a Buddha. And when we become a Buddha, may we help him or her free every single sentient being from cyclic existence. May the word pain no longer exist and the word bliss only be the experience that everyone has. Thank you so much, everyone. I really, really appreciate all of you. And please continue to change your minds. And please, share the Dharma with others in whatever capacity you can. Okay, but make sure you know what you're talking about. Don't share wrong Dharma with others. Don't even if it's going to be wrong, don't even open your mouth. Just wait till it's right and then talk a lot. Talk tons, but wait till it's right. Because when I go on TikTok and I go on some of these Instagram apps and I look at some of the Dharma that's being presented, whoa. Whoa. I don't know where you heard that, but it was not from a qualified teacher. I pray that you all meet qualified teachers. Thank you so much.